My name is Alex, and I'm the climate analyst for the regional district of Nanaimo. And tonight I'm joined here with Austin Tokrick from the Cowichan Valley Regional District and Michael Stanier here from the Fraser Basin Council, who will be our main presenter for tonight. And we would just like to welcome you all to the second event of the 2021 Fall Webinar Series. So for those of us who are joining for the first time, this series is designed to help inform participants on the available energy efficiency rebates and incentives offered both by the RDN, the CVRD, and agencies such as BC Hydro, and also to connect folks with all of the resources to be able to kind of learn more about these rebates and incentives and to also take action in ways that everybody sees fit. So tonight's presentation is on electric vehicles, and here we hope to help answer some of your questions and also provide some of the knowledge and education around purchasing, financing, and driving an electric vehicle here on Vancouver Island. So thank you for joining us all tonight. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the traditional territory of the Snoqualmie First Nation, whose land I've not only been fortunate enough to both work and live on, but have also previously learned on and also have fostered this kind of interest in sustainability and climate work in the work that I now do. At this time, I would also like to invite everyone to share where they're tuning in from in the chat box if they would like to. Before I pass the presentation on to Michael here, I'm just going to first chat about some of the current rebates, such as the electrical charging rebate offered by the RDN, and also our ongoing green building program. So just up on the slide here, again, this webinar series is a part of our larger RDN Green Building Series program. It's been going on since 2012, and the program has been open to all electoral area residents of the RDN, and it's focused on connecting residents to rebates, incentives, and also some of that professional and expert knowledge, primarily on designing, building, and renovating greener energy efficient homes in the area. So the current rebate offered that we have right now is available to all electoral area residents who install a level 2 charger into their home, and it operates on kind of a first come, first served basis. So the rebate here is to help financially support residents who want to transition to an electric vehicle and to help recover that cost of installing that home charger. So due to its popularity, this year's funds are almost used up, but we will be likely continuing again in early 2022. So as such, we'll be keeping our webpage up to date as much as possible with all of the latest information as we find out more about the program. And if you'd like to prepare for the next year and to also stay informed on the rebate, I provided a link on screen just at the bottom of the slide there, and I'll also provide it in a follow-up email to all of our participants from tonight. As we know, transportation is currently responsible for nearly 60% of emissions in the region, and transitioning to an electric vehicle can be one of the most effective actions people who drive can take. And that is something that we hope to focus on and support through this rebate and tonight's webinar. And we can just move to the final slide here. Up here are just all of the dates and times. So again, tonight's webinar is a part of our larger 2021 Fall Webinar Series, which will run up until the end of November. Next month, we have a host of new webinars for that month, and we'll be covering topics such as installing and purchasing a heat pump, accessing rebates for your home energy renovations, and also building new climate resilient homes. So the dates and times are all displayed on screen here, and all of our events are free and also open for registration. So if you or someone you know would like to register to discover more throughout the series, please follow the link again provided on screen, and I'll also be providing one in a follow-up email post webinar. That's all from my end, so I'll now pass things over to Michael. So thank you everyone, and I really hope you all enjoyed tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Michael Stanier. I'm a program coordinator at the Fraser Basin Council, which is a not-for-profit organization. We do, despite the name Fraser Basin Council, we do sustainability projects throughout the province. And I work in a working group called Plug-in BC that does various electric vehicle projects. And my main work area is something called Emotive, which is an education and outreach campaign about electric vehicles. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Emotive campaign just briefly, and then get into some key discussions around electric vehicles. And this is really a presentation mostly about owning and living with an electric vehicle. So we'll be talking a little bit about environmental impacts, and if we have time in the questions period, and if people want to get into more details about that, we can do that. But I just want to make sure that that people kind of get a lot of information about shopping for a vehicle and the rebates out there, and kind of living with and owning a vehicle on Vancouver Island. I am joining you from just outside of Courtenay, where I live on the traditional territory of the Comox Nation. And I drive electric vehicles all over BC. Sometimes it's something of my own. Sometimes it's something that I rent, or a demo car, or something provided to me through work. So I'm also happy to, entertain questions from people wanting to know about driving throughout the province, because it's something that I'm very fortunate to do, and definitely keen to share those experiences. Oh, and I should mention that the session is being recorded. So, if you have a question and you don't want to ask it in a recording, you'll have my email, or you can go to the emotivebc.ca website and submit a question through the forums there. But I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that the session is being recorded. Some people couldn't make it. And one person even couldn't make it. She emailed me to say that she's on the road driving to pick up her new electric vehicle. So definitely want to make sure that she gets a copy of this. But getting back to what is Emotive and what is it that I do. So it's one of the programs under Clean BC. It started kind of grassroots from local governments and car clubs and such, but now it is funded by the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. So we do get provincial funding for it, but I'm not a policy analyst within the province. So if you have questions about upcoming policy, I'll tell you what I can, but I'm not necessarily on the inside. What we mainly focus on is giving people a chance to experience electric vehicles, focusing on kind of the emotional and tactile appeal. And really that comes down to driving the electric vehicles. So we do various test drive events and such. We use demonstrations and educational sessions like this. And aside from giving people access to the vehicles at events, we also try and connect people with electric vehicle owners in their communities, so they can get really local answers to some of your questions. And I believe we do have some EV owners joining us tonight, and they're welcome to join in during the question and answer section. And really the conversation has changed quite a lot over the past 3 years that I've been formally working in the electric vehicle space. Our marketing research shows that 60% of drivers are considering buying an EV in the future. And the people are really getting excited about getting their electric vehicles and aspiring to have one. We're spending a lot less time sort of talking about the viability of EVs, because everyone seems to know somebody who has one, a neighbor or a family member, and sees them driving them around. And the questions are becoming a lot more specific. So again, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. And I know that you probably have some very specific questions about using EVs locally. Generally, the conversation comes down to reasons to buy an electric vehicle, that they're very, very smooth and very powerful. And they use fun new technologies such as regenerative braking, which makes power and helps to decelerate when you come to a stop or when you're going down a hill. They really do reduce emissions in a big way, especially in BC, where there's virtually no greenhouse gases when the vehicle's on the road here. And they are super, super efficient. So your electricity costs for driving an EV are way less than gas, and maintenance and fewer parts to replace too. So let's get into the specific topics here. Oh, I see someone who's waving in the background. I was just wondering if that's a hand up or no. Okay. All right. Okay, so first off, charging infrastructure. So in BC, we're lucky to have a pretty rapidly expanding network of public chargers, both fast chargers and sort of like public slower chargers. So I want to run you through the different types of chargers, what comes with the vehicle, and what you'll be using sort of outside of your home too. So every vehicle comes with what we call a level 1 charging cable. And this is something that plugs into a regular wall outlet. And it looks like a cord with a kind of brick on it. The manuals will often say that this is for emergency purposes, but you can use it all the time. It's just the slowest way of charging an electric vehicle, getting about 8 to 10 kilometers of range per hour that it's plugged in. But that's still very, very adequate for a lot of commuters, especially since EVs now have really big battery ranges. And, when I'm visiting family in Prince George, for example, and they live rurally, and I'm visiting them and commuting into town every day to still do some work, putting about 40 or 50 kilometers on the vehicle, that's still easily recovered just with that level 1 charging cord. But moving on and giving you a little bit more, you can install what's called a level 2 charging station. So these will often be in people's garages or in parkades, community centers, parks, places where people have a few hours to dwell. So these are using like a 240 volt connection, around 40 amps on average. And they're giving you 20 to 40 kilometers of range per hour that you're charging. And it is becoming more common that some automakers like GM and Ford and Tesla also has options to have sort of a combination of the level 1 and level 2 charger that comes with the vehicle. And they're usually set up to plug into like an RV outlet. So, and you can find various adapters if you've got an existing oven, dryer, welding plug, what have you, in your home. All of the level 1 and level 2 chargers that I've been talking about use a plug-in on the vehicle end called the J1772 that you can see in the illustration there, or just the J plug. So that's what the connection looks like where it plugs into the vehicle. Aside from Tesla, which has their own connection, but all Teslas come with a little adapter, so you can use those J plug charging stations. And rebates are available to purchase and install these at home and at work. And so that's what Alex was talking about earlier. Those rebates are for these level 2 charging stations. Just really briefly give you a heads up on what's out there right now under BC Hydro. So that's up to $350 or up to 50% of the cost to install a level 2 charging station at home. For multi-unit residential buildings, it's under a different program, up to $2,000 or 50%. So that's like in a parkade in a condo building. The chargers themselves range from $600 to, $1,200 or above. Kind of the sky's the limit depending on the features that you want. And usually they're made more expensive if you're getting something that's especially weather resistant or that has some like Wi-Fi abilities built in so that you can control it remotely. And yeah, you're going to need that 240 volt, 40 amp connection is what you should expect. For those who are in condos, there is a totally separate stream of funding for actually preparing an entire building to have what's called EV ready parking spaces, where there's money first to do a study of the building and figure out how this is going to be accomplished and what kind of equipment will be needed. And then additional funding once that's done to get each stall wired in so that you just have the wiring and a junction box there. And then after that, you can apply for funding to get all the charging stations put in. So if anyone is in that situation where you're in a condo building, you can reach out to us, just info@pluginbc.ca, to get more information about that, because it's a lot more complicated to put that into a condo building, and we won't get into too much of that right now. So that's like the level 1 and level 2 chargers. Once you're out doing road trips, you're going to want to be using level 3 charging stations. This is what we call fast charging stations. And they have completely different plugs. And there's 2 industry standards out there right now. One is called CHAdeMO and one is called CCS. And you'll notice the CCS plug looks like that J plug with 2 additional connections on the bottom, whereas the CHAdeMO is completely separate. So most vehicles now are using the CCS standard. The existing Nissan vehicles and some Kia vehicles use CHAdeMO. So in that case, you'll have the CHAdeMO receptacle on the vehicle and the J plug receptacle side by side with CCS. It's just the one. But regardless of that, when you come to a public charging station, it's going to have 2 kind of nozzles, one of each. So regardless of what you have, when you're going to a public charging station, you'll be able to use it. The exception, of course, being Tesla, because they just have their own plug. Though Tesla owners can buy an adapter to use the CHAdeMO connection. Now, if you're looking at plug-in hybrid vehicles, which we'll get into in a bit, most of the plug-in hybrids don't have fast charging capabilities. So they won't be able to connect to a fast charging station, even to trickle charge off of it. They'll just be using the home chargers and those public level 2 chargers. And if you're looking at used stuff, some of the older, like fully electric vehicles, if they're particularly old, they may not have fast charging abilities, so they won't have the CCS or CHAdeMO adapter or plug either. And I just want to mention, and we'll get into this with some trip examples later as well, but even though they're called fast chargers, they're definitely not all equal. The output of the fast chargers ranges from 25 kilowatts all the way up to 350 kilowatts that you'll find in BC now. And yes, faster is better as long as your vehicle can take advantage of it. So that's the public stuff. And then, so you'll see those as BC Hydro chargers or Electrify Canada chargers, or you'll see them at Canadian Tire and Petro-Canada and some rest stops. So those are all what we call public chargers. Tesla is a private network, so they have their own stuff going on. So when we talk about Tesla, we're talking about superchargers, which are the like large kind of refrigerator-sized white and red units that are hollow in the center. And then we have Tesla destination chargers, which are smaller boxes that sit on the wall, and those are the equivalent of level 2 chargers. But they all use the same plug. It's one of the compelling things about Tesla is they're super easy to use. And I just want to stress that non-Tesla vehicles cannot use Tesla charging stations. By way of tweet, Elon Musk has suggested that sometime in the next couple of years, maybe, they'll open up the network and people will be able to have adapters to use other vehicles on Tesla stations. But as of right now, only Tesla can use Tesla stations, but Tesla owners can get adapters to use at the other charging stations. So just a quick kind of visual summary of all those charging station types. The level 3 fast charging stations, again, kind of like a refrigerator-sized tall unit, can use the CHAdeMO plug, the CCS plug, and then Teslas can use them with a CHAdeMO adapter. Whereas the level 2s are kind of like a box on a pedestal or on a wall, and they're just using the J1772 plug, and Teslas have an adapter again for those. And then the Tesla superchargers and destination chargers just use the Tesla plug. In order to get a sense of where these are and to find them in your community, there's several apps and websites out there that make it quite simple. Vehicles, of course, will usually display in their navigation systems where charging stations are, but if you want to check them out in advance, you can use the most common app for this is PlugShare, and it's very helpful because it lets you view a station in real time to see if someone's using it. People can leave feedback about little details about it. It'll show if there's a problem with it. The app will show stations that are being installed soon. And you can view things in advance, like the price for charging and the types of plugs available and the kilowatt output of the station. So that's probably the most popular website and app for checking out charging stations. That's PlugShare. And here's an example, just looking a little bit closer at the kind of south and central island. You'll see there's a combination on the screen there of orange icons, and those are fast charging stations. And then the green icons are the level 2 stations. And it may sound kind of complicated that there's these various different plugs to use. But what you can do is when you're in this app, just open up the menu and you can filter out the various plugs. So you can see in the example there, we've got the Supercharger, the CCS, the CHAdeMO, and the J plug selected. If you just wanted to look for CCS plugs, you could disable everything else. Or if you just want to see the level 2 stations, then you just disable everything except the J plug. So that makes it handy to drill down to what you're really needing. So we'll look at some local examples and some of the information that you'd be looking for at a charging station. We'll take the Tesla Supercharger on the top left there. So of course you want to know if it's Tesla, because then it's Tesla only that can use it. And you can see the output of the station in kilowatts, so 150 kilowatts. The Tesla Supercharger stations can go up to 250 if they're a newer version. And you can see the price there in minutes. And then below that is Electrify Canada. I believe that's at the Canadian Tire there in Nanaimo. And it shows it has the CCS and CHAdeMO plugs. And it'll have units available ranging from 50 to 150 kilowatts. And some of the Electrify Canada stations will go up to 350 kilowatts. And then the BC Hydrocharger downtown, you can see, again, it's got CCS and CHAdeMO plugs, but it tops out at 50 kilowatts, which is respectable. There's, it was for most of the last few years, 50 kilowatts has been the standard, and only recently are we seeing some higher charging rates. Okay, we're going to move on to the variety and availability of vehicles. Now that we've established kind of the charging infrastructure and things to look for there, this is a very exciting time. There's tons and tons of new vehicles coming out, more being announced all the time. We've got the trucks coming out. Kind of starting next year, people will be getting their hands on the electric pickup trucks, but all sorts of vehicles with exciting new technologies hitting the streets. And let me say, I started doing this work in 2018, formally working in this space. And the variety and even the availability of vehicles has just exploded since then. It's really night and day. When we're talking about electric vehicles, there's some vehicles out there that manufacturers will call electrified, but not electric vehicles. And one of those would be just a regular hybrid. So stuff like the Toyota Prius, for example, have been around for a long time. They do have a battery in them, a small battery, and they have electric motors to help drive the vehicle around, but they still have to get all their power predominantly from gas, and they can't plug in. They can't connect to the grid at all. So we don't call those electric vehicles. though you'll see them called electrified vehicles sometimes. But then we move into things called plug-in hybrids. So these vehicles have a substantial battery, not as much as a full-on completely electric vehicle, but enough to cover most people's commute or a good portion of their commute, after which point they're just going to operate like a normal hybrid electric vehicle. And there was a little variation on that called the range extended vehicle. You'll see the example is the BMW there below the Jeep Wrangler 4xe. And they had some bigger batteries and would have a gasoline, like a generator that charges up the battery but never drives the vehicle. And then the full-on battery electric vehicles, most of them are sitting in the 350 to 500 kilometer kind of range, but some of the higher end flagship stuff getting upwards of 650 kilometers. And fuel cell vehicles, we're not really going to get into fuel cell vehicles tonight because they're not so available. A lot of them are mostly just kind of in fleet pilots right now, but they do use batteries and electric motors. Now, rebates for this stuff. There's the Clean BC Go Electric rebate and the federal IZEV rebate. And on a fully electric vehicle, those are going to be combined and add up to $8,000. Most of the plug-in hybrids, and the reason why it varies is it's kind of based on battery size. So most of the plug-in hybrids are going to get the half amounts on that. So 1,500 from Clean BC and 2,500 federally. These are on new vehicles only, and they are point of purchase rebates. So when you're at a dealership, once during the transaction, the rebate will be applied. You don't have to fill out any paperwork. It's all handled by the dealership. Keep in mind that these are rebates. They're not price reductions. So whatever the sale price comes to for the vehicle, you pay that, any taxes on that, and then you get the rebate. Most manufacturers will give you the option to select which province you're in if you're on their website, kind of shopping around, and they'll factor the rebates in. But make sure that the options to show with tax are enabled if you're kind of building your vehicle online, just so you get a accurate idea of what the end price is going to be. There has been a program called BC Scrap It, which involved scrapping your old vehicle. This one is running out of funding, and according to their website, they're not going to run it next year. I have seen a couple dealerships advertising that they still have some availability for this, but I really wouldn't bank on it at this point if you're going to be getting something in the new year for sure. And then there is the specialty use vehicle incentive. That's for everything that's not a passenger vehicle, from motorbikes to sort of low speed scooters, ATVs. It also covers like buses and stuff, but definitely the most popular component of that is motorcycles and cargo e-bikes for businesses. So I just want to jump into a little bit more differences between the various types of electric vehicles. The full-on battery electric vehicle, I've got the image there of the Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus, just because it is probably the most common electric vehicle that people recognize on the road. They're very simple, just the battery and the motor. Lots of torque. EVs are really notorious for that, and regenerative braking. So those are the main differences that you're going to feel big time when you get into them. They do have multi-motor options for really advanced all-wheel drive, and the charging speeds and the ranges are increasing dramatically. As I mentioned before, some of the older models could not use fast chargers, but all the new models can. And we've been over the plug types, but I just want to emphasize that non-Tesla vehicles cannot use Tesla charging stations. And then the plug-in hybrid, some really compelling stuff and a lot of variety in plug-in hybrids. So they do have a smaller battery than a full-on electric vehicle or a full-on battery electric vehicle, but it still does a tremendous amount of work, can save you a lot of money because most people are using them to run almost entirely on electricity and very rarely needing gas. If you are in the situation where you're able to run them and hardly ever need gas, they'll still kick on the gas engine sometimes, just so that the fuel doesn't go foul and they don't corrode and that sort of thing. They still use the regenerative braking technology to charge up the battery. And they'll charge it up, of course, by plugging in when you get a chance to do that. And the gas engine, just like any hybrid, will charge up the battery a bit too once you run the battery down. And again, I just want to stress that most of these cannot connect to a fast charging station. And like I said, there were some of these vehicles called extended range vehicles. Some of them could use a fast charging station because the battery was big enough. But you might find some new BMW i3s out there, though I think they've stopped making those. The other main model of this was the Chevrolet Volt, which is out of production now. But if you're looking at used stuff, you're definitely going to see these. And that's what the range extended vehicle is. It is like a fully electric vehicle, but it has a small gas tank and a small gas generator that just powers up the battery and never actually runs the drivetrain. And like I said, fuel cell vehicles, they are technically electric. It's just that they're using a onboard hydrogen tank instead of having a big battery. On the emotivebc.ca website, I keep a brochure of everything that's available to buy and order in BC right now, with the MSRPs and the range ratings for the vehicles. So some of this stuff is too expensive to receive rebates, but it's just everything that's available right now. And I guess I should have mentioned on the rebate front. Generally, vehicles that are up to $45,000 MSRP are eligible for the rebates, though they can be optioned out up to $55,000. So that's why, like the base model of the Tesla Model 3, the Standard Range Plus Model 3 is an optioned out version of like a lower capacity kind of a special order one. So they're able to kind of squeak in there into the rebate program. Whereas if you're looking at a all-wheel drive Model 3, that's more expensive, it won't get the rebates. Just another sample from that brochure that we keep on the website, the plug-in hybrid section. So you can see there's a pretty big variety of plug-in hybrids out there, and I do need to add some more to these this week because Hyundai and Kia have some new plug-in hybrid SUVs as well. So that's on the homepage of emotivebc.ca. And just want to dip into some info about the used vehicle market for electric vehicles. Around 2017, 2018, we started to get really compelling stuff coming out, like the Chevrolet Bolt, the Hyundai Kona, for example, kind of more affordable vehicles that had high ranges. And those are coming off lease now, or they're off leases and they're available in the used market. So you're going to find them at the OEM dealerships. There are some dedicated used EV dealerships around, and you'll see them in private sales for sure too. Some things to check, the battery health of the vehicle. So a dealership should be able to give you a report on the health of the vehicle, or if you know someone who has a EV already, or even has just like a kind of Bluetooth diagnostic tool, you'll be able to find an app to connect to the diagnostic port of a a vehicle if you find one that you're pretty sure is a winner, and be able to read the battery state of health. But a dealership for sure should be able to help you with that. Be aware of any recalls. As you've probably seen in the news, there's a GM recall right now on all of the Chevrolet Bolts, which is a bit of a hassle if you're on the wait list for that. But it's also it also makes a used Bolt kind of compelling because it gets a brand new battery, and it gets the warranty on the battery refreshed for another 8 years. Also make sure that it still has some of the specialty equipment like the level 1 charging cord. And a lot of the cars don't come with a spare tire. Instead, they have kind of specialty tires and a tire repair kit. And that's usually going to be in the trunk somewhere where the spare would normally be. So make sure that it's usually like a inflator kit and a special kind of patch solution. So make sure it's got that. And one other important thing to keep in mind, well, all of the public charging station sites are going to have a CHAdeMO plug. The industry is kind of moving away from that. So if you go to a place like one of the big Electrify Canada sites that's at a Canadian Tire, and there's 6 stalls for charging, there might only be one that has a CHAdeMO plug. And this kind of comes into play if you're looking at a used Nissan Leaf or a Kia Soul. I think those are going to be the most common ones. Just know that there are fewer CHAdeMO plugs out there than CCS. And looking to the future, as I mentioned, there's a bunch of EV trucks coming online from startups like Rivian. There's also the Ford F-150 Lightning that has tons and tons of pre-orders. And the kind of infamous and controversially designed Cybertruck, of course. But some other stuff that doesn't really make the headlines so much, but is really fun regardless. Volkswagen is committed to bringing back their kind of van with the Volkswagen ID Buzz. That's not near production yet, but we should be seeing that in a few years. As well as, so I've shown the Kia EV6 and Hyundai Ionic 5. They're really interesting and really anticipated because they use a much faster charging infrastructure, and they get into that 350 kilowatt charging range that I've alluded to a bit. And they're Kias and Hyundais, whereas the only thing that charges that fast right now is the Porsche Taycan. So hopefully there's these really fast charging vehicles coming out next year that are gonna break into that sub Porsche priced market. I want to talk a little bit, really briefly, about some trip examples and kind of the range anxiety and road trips, and then leave a good chunk of time for questions. So we've talked about charging stations quite a lot. I think this kind of repeats what I've talked about, but getting into road trips. So I talked about the PlugShare app or website. There's one other really good one to look at, and I'll be showing you some examples, and it's called a Better Route Planner. And you can use this to simulate electric vehicle trips. And when you're out on a trip, you're not driving the car from 100% to 0% and then charging. Most of the time you're sitting between 20 and 80% of the battery. So you drive it down to around 20% and be planning to charge at that point. And yeah, as I've mentioned, different models have different charging capacity, and so do fast charging stations. And I'll be showing you some examples of how that comes into play. But for most of your charging and traveling throughout BC, there's not so much of a need for range anxiety because there's a lot of charging stations, and mostly it comes down to charging convenience. Again, some examples of vehicles and their different charging speeds. So you can see stuff like the Bolt and the Leaf and some older models that are in at the 50 kilowatt charging rate. And then some of the newer stuff and models that have been around for a while in the 50 to 150 kilowatt charging rate. All of the Teslas can do up to 250 if you can find the right supercharger to get up to 250. And then, yeah, like I said, Porsche Taycan can hit 350, and there's some new models coming out that will do that as well. And I should mention that just because something's rated up to 250 kilowatts, it's not going to be charging at that rate for the entire time. So it's not necessarily, 5 times faster than, say, a Bolt. It's just the peak charging that it can hit. And while you're charging, the car and the charging station communicate and make sure that it's safe for the battery so that there's no overheating. And you'll see that, it might spike up to 150 or 250, but once you get to the 80 mark, it's going to drop off substantially in order to protect the battery. So a couple examples using the Better Route Planner tool. We're going to look at, say, driving from Nanaimo to Victoria and then back to Nanaimo. So what you would do actually, if you're hopping into a Better Route Planner, yeah, you set these locations, and then there's the big blue button. That's what you hit to generate the trip. You can also, as you'll see, you can add the car that you're using. You can add things like temperature and weight in the vehicle, other kinds of bad weather. You can tell it what you want to start with and what you want to end with in terms of the battery charge. So a lot of fun to be had comparing vehicles and comparing trips with this tool. But in our simulated trip from Nanaimo to Victoria and back, I'm gonna pick on the Nissan Leaf here, and this is the lowest battery option from the Nissan Leaf because they do have a higher range option. But to drive down to Victoria and then just immediately turn around and drive back, you'd be looking at doing 2 charging stops for a total of 33 minutes. And you can see those are broken down in that list of kind of waypoints there, charging for 20 minutes on the way down, and then charging for 13 minutes on the way back, arriving back in Nanaimo at 15%. So you could also, play with this tool and say, I want to come back with 10%, or I want to come back with 20%, and be a bit different. And then the Kona and the Model 3, other very popular models, the battery is big enough that you wouldn't have to charge it all to do that trip. Another example, driving from Victoria to Campbell River. And I've switched out the Leaf to bring in the Chevrolet Bolt because these vehicles all have fairly similar ranges, but their charging speed is different. So you see the Bolt has 50 kilowatts, the Kona has 77, and the Model 3 will go up to 250 at the right station. But you can see now the trip for the Bolt is 1 charge for 13 minutes. The Kona is 1 charge for 11 minutes because it charges a little bit faster. And then the Model 3, substantially less time, 8 minutes at the supercharger. So I just want to use those as some examples to give you an idea of the difference that the charging levels make. And one more thing to mention, on emotivebc.ca, I keep a library of stories from people all over the province who are using electric vehicles, and you can sort of get a sense of what their EV lifestyle looks like in their communities. And then quickly just jumping into emissions and emission reductions and why there's so much policy around electric vehicles. I want to stress that EVs are super, super efficient. They're about 3 times more efficient with the energy they're given than a gas vehicle. They don't idle, they don't have to rev up and get through gears in the transmission. And the torque that an electric motor makes really gets them going without using up a lot of energy compared to a gas vehicle. And it's true that greenhouse gas reductions are going to vary by power source. So in grids, it's going to vary throughout Canada. Some are using some coal and some natural gas to produce electricity, but electric vehicles are so efficient that they are always cleaner than gas, and this has been measured over and over in studies throughout the world and in Canada. But in BC, we do have a very clean grid, so it makes a tremendous difference driving an electric vehicle in BC. Basically, they're producing 99% fewer emissions over their lifetime. And a lot of studies will say a lifetime of a vehicle is 150,000 kilometers. Of course, we drive our vehicles in reality much more than that. So the reduction is just greater and greater, but at that point, it's virtually nothing. When it comes to the energy required to produce an electric vehicle, it is true that because battery manufacturing is intensive and added on, that there is an upfront kind of greenhouse gas cost, really depending on the grid where the manufacturing takes place. But grids all over the world are moving more to renewable energy. So studies that keep track of this show that the upfront greenhouse gas cost does continue to fall. And then once it's on the road, of course, it doesn't really produce any greenhouse gases. So you'll typically offset the manufacturing emissions in BC in like worst case scenario, 2 to 3 years, but a lot of people are knocking that out in really around a year to kind of overcome those initial greenhouse gas emissions associated with manufacturing. And I know there's always questions about batteries, but I just want to point out that batteries are covered by warranties for 8 years or 160,000 kilometers, and that's more than most engine and drivetrain warranties on gas vehicles. Outside of a recall, the likelihood of needing a replacement battery in a new modern EV is really, really low. I don't know anyone who's actually had to do that outside of their warranty on anything new. Maybe like a super old Leaf or iMeV or original Tesla Model S, possibly, but new stuff, it just really doesn't happen. And yeah, the newer batteries are just getting much better and much cheaper all the time. When they come out of a vehicle, they can be repurposed for energy storage. So they don't go to landfills or even recycling right away. They often go into other projects, or the vehicle makers really try and get everything back at this point. Batteries are expensive and they're just too valuable to be thrown away, to be discarded. And there are commercial recyclers. Some in Canada are Life Cycle, Retrieve Technologies, and American Manganese, which is in Burnaby. And recently it was announced that the vehicle makers will be responsible for battery recycling costs by 2026 through Recycle BC. And just some other perks. There's less brake dust because the regenerative braking using the resistance from the electric motor is used primarily to slow the vehicle down. Much less noise pollution. It's true, they're very, very silent. And there's just not as many fluids in there to leak out onto your driveway or parking area at work or onto the roads. And any emissions associated, even in grids or in grids that are using the peaker plants and coal plants and stuff, that power production is shifted away from hospitals, schools, workplaces, all that stuff. And I've mentioned a few times, we've got the emotivebc.ca website with a lot of resources on there. And you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook too. And I write some articles on Plugin BC about this stuff as well. We have been doing a lot more video content, so you can check out our little YouTube channel. It's fairly new, but we do have content from around BC there. So we're going to get into the questions and answers period here. before we do that, I think we're just going to give you some contact information. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just leave the contact information up on the screen while we get into some Q&A for a few minutes. Alex, if there's anything that you wanted to add about the contact info, go ahead.
Yeah, for any questions or concerns, you guys can contact sustainability@rdn.bc.ca directly. So that'll go to my supervisor, and there we'll be able to answer all of your questions regarding RDN specific rebates and incentives, and also some general questions about EV charging stations and infrastructure and what some of the projections are for the RDN in general. You can also follow along. Again, I mentioned the link in the chat, but if you're interested in some more of our webinars for next month, the link at the bottom there, the 2021 fall webinar series, that will take you to more of our webinars for next month, and it'll give a synopsis for each webinar and a direct link to registration. And again, they are all free and open to register for. But any direct questions and concerns, please contact sustainability@rdn.bc.ca. And that's everything on my end.
All right, thanks, Alex.
Thank
I'm
you.
just jumping into the chat here. See if I pick out any questions here that I can answer quickly. Oh, here's one. Interested in charging prices. How are they determined? What is the average charging price to take car from 20 to 60%, for instance? Okay, so the charging prices at actually, let's start with level 2 stations. So those smaller kind of wall boxes, more of a gradual charge. Those are usually in kind of like the $1 to $2 an hour range. They used to be free quite often. But from what I understand, most operators have implemented a charge just to move people off of the station once their vehicle is charged up, so that they're not kind of using something at a local park, et cetera, as a free source of electricity for their daily charging. And then when it comes to fast charging stations, these charging stations that are pumping out, 50 or 150 kilowatts, they are incurring big demand charges. It's quite a lot of electricity to be pumping out all at once. So those you're going to see they're anywhere between like 20 to nearly 60 cents per minute. And I'll use an example of a recent trip I did. I rented a Mustang Mach-E, which charges at up to about 100 kilowatts. And I drove this from Surrey, where I picked it up to Valemount. And I was able to use some of the fast charging stations that would charge about around 50 cents a minute. And yeah, I was going from about 20 or 30% to 80%. And that I was spending around 15 to 18 minutes doing those charges. So that's like I guess they're coming out to like $10, $12. I think I was on there a little bit longer because I was doing other things. But the whole trip, say driving up to Valemount, cost about $40 at fast charging stations. So the fast charging, that puts you around probably half-ish of what you'd spend on gas in a crossover. Trying to think, like my family has an older Honda SUV, and yeah, it costs around $100 in gas to do that trip. So it's not super cheap as you'd be paying at home, but you're kind of paying for that demand charge and the convenience, and it still works out to being less than gas. Let's see, what else did we have? Yeah, there were some questions about battery replacements, and they really are designed for the lifetime of the vehicle now. And there's a good amount of news coverage of older vehicles that were really like the first attempt to make electric vehicles, and those needing replacements. But outside of that, I haven't heard, like, I don't know anybody who's needed a replacement, outside of their warranty. And automakers are committing to making the battery packs more serviceable, and we do have programs at colleges in BC for automotive techs to learn how to service and work on electric vehicles. But really, the battery pack replacement, I think, has been kind of hyped up by some of the earlier vehicles. It's just really not something that we see now. See a new. Okay. Yeah, it's something that we don't see yet. A lot of the vehicles, that are in the market really haven't reached that out of warranty period, unless they were, those beginning sort of Nissan, maybe Mitsubishi, and some Tesla vehicles. But in everything that I've driven, and virtually everyone who I know who also runs an electric vehicle, just isn't really needing to replace that battery. Let's see if we've got any other questions that were from the chat. I think we've gone over battery stuff quite a lot. Got a few minutes here. I do kind of have like a hard stop at 8 o'clock ish. If anyone has a question, you can go ahead and unmute and ask that.
We do have a question from Frank Bastiano. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. His hand is just raised in the chat there.
Oh,
and
okay,
Frank,
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead,
you're still
Frank.
muted.
Thanks.
There. Sorry, Frank, you're still muted there.
I'll give you a prompt to unmute. Oh, we aren't getting any audio there, Frank. You're still muted.
There we are.
There we go.
Perfect.
Oh, I've got one good hand, see, so I have to use one hand for everything. I too, about 4 years ago, we bought our first car, electric, Tesla S. And 2 years after that, we bought our second Model 3. And both have performed exceptionally well, and have had little battery drop in efficiency. Now, it may be that particular battery, that cooling system, that technology may be a little better, who knows? But you're right, batteries are not showing to be problematic. And in fact, the fellows at Tesla said they rarely replace total batteries. They'll replace it on cell, because they have the technology to read the cells individually. And they'll mark cell A on line 3 to be a bad cell, and they'll change it. And it's fairly cost efficient. In any event, I've taken 4 trips to the Mexican border, Southern California, very, very, very easy to make in our cars. We drive for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, get out, use the facilities, have a coffee, stretch your legs, get back in, drive again. Very comfortable. Highly recommended for driving long distances. The cars are comfortable. Even the new other manufacturers' cars are comfortable. Good driving, easy driving. And of course, the modern cars have things to help you drive. And there are a benefit. There's no question there's a benefit to a long distance driver. And of course, long distance drivers have different needs for charging. The Tesla system, which I would use because I have a Tesla, works very well for me, except I can't go to North BC. And the only organization that really does a really good job is BC Hydro. And I kudos to BC Hydro for setting out their charging stations along Skeena River, for example. And you can make some wonderful trips up there. I haven't had a chance to yet because Tesla, as you know, does not make an adapter for the newer connector. And BC Hydro shows CHAdeMO and CCS as the standard for the time being. But that's hardware. And hardware changes, as you know, changes quickly. And we all went from beta to VHS. And guess what? Now there's neither. So sometime soon, and in the future, and particularly my kids, will have a car that hopefully the hardware is more consistent, easier to use, and it's easier to pay for things. So yeah, I've had both experiences. And we have a solar panel on the roof of our house, and we of course charge at home. So in terms of cost, I might get a bill from BC Hydro in the winter, January, February, for $200, $300. Other than that, I don't get bills from BC Hydro because we charge at home and look after the house needs. So that's an extension of what you're suggesting happen. And I think is that you become more friendly to the environment. We use BC Power as our method for powering our lives if we can. In the event, I have a few pet peeves, which I won't air tonight, but they really are relatively minor when you really think of the health of the climate, the health of the earth, and that's what got us into it. And a good example is we went to the RDN for rebates on our 2 chargers, and they wouldn't give us rebates. The person at the counter gave us a blank stare, like, what are we, nuts? So that wouldn't stop me, because my goal was to ultimately look for a way to reduce the reliance on things that produce CO2 gases and so on, that ultimately hurt the climate. So that's where we come from. To all the people listening, there's no question the future is electric or almost all electric. And I think a 10-year window or 15-year window, that's all you'll see. And I think we all should prepare for that. And believe me, the move from gas to electric is a no-brainer. And a few little things operating differently, I plan a little more, I do a little more, think ahead of time, but it's easy. And I think you'll agree, Michael, because you're a traveler too, and you've been through the same rigmarole I've been through with learning the new cars. In the event, that's all I have to say for now. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. A lot of good perspectives there. And you mentioned Northern BC. Someone in the chat also mentioned the North. There are, I'm just going to speak very briefly. It's really near and dear to me. There's a lot of charging stations up Highway 97 now. Tesla sites coming online too. So you can get up to Prince George and start heading across Highway 16. Those are coming on fairly soon. Some of them are operational already.
They're getting better.
Yeah.
Cache Creek is the last Tesla charger, and then I get into BC Hydro, and I'll give credit to BC Hydro. I don't know if BC Hydro is listening, but thank you. At some point over the next year, I know Tesla is going to give me or sell me an adapter that will allow me to connect. And they're now producing them for South Korea, and they have the same system for power that we have. And I would say if I listen to Elon Musk, Tesla, but listen to him, he's telling us to hang on a bit longer and we'll get our adapter. In which case, the trip along the Skeena River, which I'm looking forward to doing someday, will be available to me. Right now, it's too close for comfort, very free. personal. And just like buying a car, it's personal. You buy the car for you. That suits your habits, your driving, your life, your whatever, your bank checkbook, and so on. Right? You buy what you need to buy for yourself first, and so on. My wife wanted a car that would drive to Jory and back. So again, a no-brainer. It had to be a Tesla at the time, in 2008, because I think it was the only car that would go with that range. And I don't blame her. I mean, what the heck, eh? That's all she wanted. She wanted to be able to drive without having to recharge if she could, or charge earlier. And of course, at that time, there was no charge station Supercharger for Tesla in Victoria. So in any event, you learn your way through it. I said to everyone who has one, who wants one or looking or thinking of one, it's the future. Look forward to it. It's great, and you'll help all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. And we're going on, coming up to 10 after 8. And I do have another online engagement to facilitate. I know there's a few other questions out there, but please do reach out to me with your questions. Info@pluginbc. You can connect with me there or go on to emotivebc.ca, and we have a questions field there as well. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and really do want to encourage you to reach out with any more questions that you have. Alex, I see you unmuted there. Any parting words?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you both, Michael and Austin, for joining us tonight, and for everybody for taking their evening to chat with us electric vehicles. As just a follow-up, I've been kind of keeping track of all the questions in the chat box here. So over the next little while, I'll be doing some information gathering, getting some resources to everybody who's participated tonight. So if you have any missed questions, we'll make sure to follow up on that. Again, anything specific to the RDN, please reach out to sustainability@rdn.bc.ca and also visit our website. But other than that, thank you again, everybody, for joining. Tonight was very informative, so thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And with that, I'm going to be closing up the meeting here. So everyone have a great night.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Ciao.